Hey everybody, I'm going to try this again today. Hopefully I'll do a better job and you won't be craning your necks to see the video that's been filmed in the wrong angle. We're making a couple things today. We're going to be making, my food is whole food, plant-based, no oil. So I'll be going over some techniques and the ways I do things. So try to teach you some things as we go. I don't want to overdo it and bore you to death, so I'm going to try to keep this a little bit shorter and get through it faster. But first I want to show you some of the ingredients that we're going to be using. First of all, in our shepherd beans first, but in the shepherd's pie we're going to, as you can see here, these are some of the things I use in the shepherd's pie. Some lacinato kale, a leek, and some cabbage. And I have heard from people that for whatever reason, produce is really easy to find right now. So even though the shelves may be bare of cans of tuna, apparently people aren't stripping the shelves bare of fresh vegetables, so you shouldn't have any trouble finding these. And if you're starting a garden, it's pretty easy to grow things like kale and cabbage and that sort of thing. I have Swiss chard in my garden that comes up every year that I planted one time, and it was there all winter and it's already back. So I have a lot of Swiss chard that I could just go out and pick in the garden if I wanted to. So this is going to be in the shepherd's pie, along with, instead of potatoes, we're going to be using cauliflower. So I've steamed some cauliflower, and I'm going to be showing you how we're going to make that into a topping a little bit later. And then we're going to start off with some beans. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Rancho Gordo Bean Club, but they actually have a bean club where they send you, you belong to a subscription service, and they send you beans once a quarter, a variety of beans. For example, I'll show you. I have a whole collection that I've gotten from my time in this membership of all these different varieties of beans, and I've used a lot of them too, and they're so good. They're so much better than other beans, but that doesn't mean supermarket beans aren't good too. You can definitely use any supermarket beans that you have access to, and they'll be also great. But I'm making my Rancho Gordo beans because I have so many, and for today's demo I'm making a yellow eye bean. And yellow eye beans are, they're kind of like a white bean. You can use them in navy bean stews and things, calling for white beans. Now I've never tried them before, but I have heard that they're really good. So that's what we're going to be making today. Now, why am I doing a cooking demo on making beans? Surely everybody knows how to make beans. Isn't that the simple thing? Instant Pot all the time. They just throw a pound of beans in the Instant Pot with 6 to 8 cups of water, a little garlic, onion, and whatever aromatic you want to put in there, but I usually just put onion, and throw the beans in the water in the Instant Pot, put it on for anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes depending on the kind of bean. Don't soak the beans, nothing. Let it release naturally, and then you have this huge batch of beans. I make those all the time for my cooking classes, and they taste great, especially the black I've been doing lately is with these Rancho Gordo beans because of the bean. So if you have a special bean you want to try with this, or just sprouts, pinto beans are delicious and their black beans are delicious. Try this method because it's really kind of nice. It's a good thing for when you're staying at home, which most of us are doing. So with the Rancho Gordo beans, I use their recommended technique for cooking beans. And what they say to do is to soak the beans for 6 to 7 hours. So in the morning, like at 6 o'clock in the morning, because I get up early, I put the beans in some water and let them soak. So they don't have to soak overnight, they just soak 6 or 7 hours. So those are ready, they've been soaking. And then, as in any good bean recipe, they always say to add some, ingredients. We call them in the chef world, we call these ingredients aromatics. And really all that is carrot, celery, garlic. It could be bell peppers, like the good old mirepoix. Mirepoix is the French term for the carrot, celery, and onion, but the Louisiana version has bell peppers, so that's kind of the gumbo, the basics for gumbo. So what we're going to do is, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to heat up some of these vegetables to put in our beans. And we don't use oil in the whole food plant-based forks over knives type way of eating, so we have to saute things in water. or without water, just in a dry pan. And so that's really kind of a technique. A lot of people have problems with that. It's pretty simple, but I'm going to show you how I do it. I do this every time because it seems to be one of the most requested issues that people come up with, is they don't know how to cook without oil. So what I'm doing a little bit off camera is I'm just cutting up these vegetables, kind of rough chopping the carrots and the celery and the onions. In fact, I can kind of turn the camera over here so you can see what I'm doing. So you see I'm just cutting this celery, kind of finely chopping it. I don't want it to be too chunky. I want it to be a little bit bigger. And it's just one stalk of celery. We don't want to have too much of any ingredient in here. And also that was 8 ounces of beans. I don't usually make a pound of beans because my husband's not a big bean eater. He says that he doesn't like the way beans make him feel, whatever that means. He's not a whole food plant-based person either, but you know, he puts up with my stuff and he eats a lot of my food, so I don't bother him too much about it. But he is not crazy about all my beans. So I've learned that 8 ounces of beans is plenty, because this will give me servings for 3 or 4 days, and then it's done and I don't have to have a lot of leftovers. But so if you have more people in your family, sure, make more, make the whole pound. Also, the Rancho Gordo beans are kind of expensive, so it's better not to make too many at one time. So I'm gonna kind of finely chop this onion. I think I've showed you before that you cut along the lines of the onion, and that kind of gives you a guide for cutting it into a chopped onion. And I show people this in the classes. I don't know where that big chunk came from, but it's a lot faster than you know, just kind of having a mountain of onion on your cutting board. And we're not going to use this whole onion half because it would be overwhelmingly too oniony. We're going to just use like half a cup of it, and I can use it again for another dish. So I'm going to throw this onion in the pan, because what I'm trying to do is develop some flavor. That's why we're always sauteing things in oil. They're trying to use the fat to develop flavor in the food. So, you know, the old flavor carrier that we learned in culinary school was fat. Well, without fat, you know, you figure, well, how am I going to have flavor in my food? Well, truthfully, the vegetables have a flavor. And if you're not using oil, you really start tasting the flavor of the vegetables more. You'd be surprised. At first, when people told me that, I really didn't believe them. I thought, you know, I'm never going to get over not being able to start with clarified butter or olive oil, because, you know, that was kind of the basic thing that we always use to make stuff. I'm putting a carrot, 1 carrot, in the flavorings for the beans. I'm just kind of cutting it into little diced pieces, chopping it up. First I'm cutting it into planks, and then I'm cutting the planks into sort of julienne strips, and then I can pile them all together and cut them into little diced pieces. Now, don't grade me on my knife skills, because I'm sure they're not that great. They did keep an eye on us in culinary school many years ago, and it made me really nervous. I'm surprised I didn't cut myself, but I learned enough to get by. So I'm putting the carrots in here too. So now I've got carrots, I've got onions, I've got my celery in the pan here, and they're cooking just fine. Now, it's how I know to start adding some liquid is because I see a little bits of brown, so it's kind of having that caramelization effect. So I know that if I don't add some liquid here pretty soon, it's going to start burning. I can just tell from experience. So at this point, this is when I start adding stuff. So I have some leftover vegetable broth from yesterday, and I added just a couple spoonfuls of that. So 2 tablespoons is enough to then, you know, start cooking down these vegetables. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some garlic. We don't want the garlic to burn, so I usually add the garlic after I've got the celery, carrots, and onions cooking down a little bit. So I'm going to add 2 cloves of garlic, just peeling them by pressing the knife down on them. I'm just going to, you know, kind of finely dice the garlic up. and then we'll throw it in there. Now, if you don't like the taste of garlic, there's no reason for you to use it. I happen to like garlic, so I'm going to throw some in here, and it does seem to flavor the beans and make them taste really good. So when I'm making the beans in the Instant Pot, I also use garlic for that. So there goes the garlic. I'm going to stir it around a little bit. And this doesn't really have to cook that long. I would probably, cook it for about 3 minutes, just enough to get the rawness out of it. Because we're going to be cooking it some more. We're going to put it in the sauce, the pot as well. All right, so I have I think this is how many quarts? 3.5 quart heavy duty Cauliflower pan. The funny story is I ordered a new steamer pan and this came instead. It was a mistake. And I thought, well, I'm never going to use that. That's an odd size pot. I'm going to have to send it back and get the steamer. Well, I ended up keeping this one and I use it all the time. And then the reason I was getting a new steamer is because I have my steamer from the 1970s that is so cheap and old that I was going to throw it away. Well, I kept it and it still works fine, so I'm just going to keep using it. Nothing wrong with it, really. So I have my pot here. Now, Rancho Gordo's bean recipe that they supply with all their beans, it's on their website, says to put the beans with their soaking liquid into the pot. They don't tell you to get rid of the soaking liquid. According to them, the soaking liquid provides flavor, so they tell you to keep it. So why not? I tried it both ways and I thought it was fine either way. So I put the soaking liquid in here, and there's a couple of bean skins floating on the top. I did rinse them off really well previously before I added water to them, so I picked over them. You're always supposed to pick over beans because they could have little bits of dirt or hard beans or rotten beans in there. I'm going to add a little more water. So with the Rancho Gordo beans, they tell you to have 1 inch of water above the level of the beans. So, that's pretty much what I have. And then I'm going to add my vegetables into the bean water. Now, why didn't I just cook these vegetables in the saucepan? The beans are going in, wouldn't that make sense? Well, since it's a small quantity, if I tried to cook that amount of vegetables in this little pot that I'm using, it would take forever for them to brown. So it's a lot easier to do them in, a larger surface area. Now there's some kind of little brown bits on the bottom of this skillet, so what I can do is I can deglaze it. You can kind of hear it sizzling. And deglazing, you get this nice brown kind of liquid. It's got a lot of flavor, and it also kind of cleans the pan out. So I deglazed it. Rancho Gordo instructions say that they want you to bring the beans to a hard boil for about 10 to 15 minutes. So in their instructions, they want you to just boil the beans and then simmer them for anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. So that's kind of vague, but all these different beans have different cooking times. So you can't say to only use a certain cooking time. It's going to depend on the age of the beans. It's going to depend on the type of bean. So I just kind of, once they're simmering, I check them from time to time. And the Rancho Gordo company will say that you can tell the beans are ready because you start to smell the smell of the beans and not the smell of, the aromatics or anything else. So you can really smell the smell of beans. And they're right, you can. There's a certain point when the beans are ready and you'll just be able to tell. You'll smell the nice aroma, rich aroma of cooking beans. So I'm gonna let that come to a boil and boil for about 10 minutes while we're working on our other dish. Now, this is not gonna be ready by the time the video is over, but you get the idea. That's how you cook your beans. If you're at home and you just wanna cook a different type of bean every day, this is a great way to do it. Just do half a pound of beans and have a variety. The people that like to batch cook and make huge quantities because they have a big family, I totally get that. Instant Pot is great for that. But if it's just you and one other person, or it's just you by yourself, you can cook a small amount of beans and it's really great. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to make our shepherd's pie. Now, most people think about shepherd's pie. They think about potato topped pie with some kind of meat and vegetables in it. And that is one version of shepherd's pie. Now, the vegan or plant-based shepherd's pies that I've always made in the past tended to have vegetables on the bottom, and the top would be potatoes. Now, some of them would have potatoes that were pretty plain, just potatoes and plant milk, and that tastes okay, but it's kind of bland. And then I made a shepherd's pie version with potatoes that had cashew cream, and that was a lot better because just a little cashew cream creates a really nice taste to potatoes or whatever you're making. So I really like that better. But then I was watching the Today Show, and a chef was on the Today Show, and she made a version of shepherd's pie that I had never seen before, and she used cauliflower as the topping. So the interesting thing about watching cooking demos is I like to keep an open mind, because you never know if you're going to see something that you really, really like. And I watched those things and I thought, oh, I don't know that I would like that. But you know, they give you the recipe. So I went to the Today Show website, got the recipe. I thought, well, I'll make this. Probably won't like it, but I'll make it. It has weird stuff in it, kale that I've never tried. It's got cauliflower, which I don't really love that much. And I made it, and I just love this dish. I don't know why. There's something about it. The cauliflower has a really good taste. I like the bitter kale in it. I like the cabbage. I like the leeks. I like everything about it. So we're going to make it, and you can try to make it at home. But I'm also going to talk about the variations, because not everyone loves the taste of this, the ingredients, the leeks and kale. And I've found that out by teaching it to some different people in my cooking classes, that they weren't that crazy about the taste of some of the ingredients. So we could modify it. It's not carved in stone. You don't have to make it a certain way. So I'm going to start, I think I'm going to start by making the pie ingredients, the inside ingredients, and then while that's cooking, we'll make the cauliflower topping, because I've already steamed the cauliflower. So I took a whole head, it wasn't quite 2 pounds, of a fresh cauliflower, cut it into florets. So they're, you know, they're kind of good sized pieces, and I steamed them. It took about 12 minutes. And the thing about it is, you don't want the cauliflower to turn to mush. It needs to still have a little bit of body, or else it just gets too soft. So the cauliflower has some body to it, and the topping ingredients is not going to be too complicated, but it's mainly cauliflower, cashews, and some seasonings. The inside part, the filling, has more ingredients. So we're going to start with that. And in this example of a filling, we're going to use leeks. Well, I showed you before. We're using the cabbage, leeks, and lacinato kale. And because we're making it whole food, plant-based, no oil, of course, we're not going to use any oil. So in the regular recipe, they'll always say start with 1 or 2 tablespoons of oil, but we're not going to do that. We're going to just put our vegetables in there, and I'm going to start with the leek. Now, leeks are funny because you think, oh, that can't be that complicated to make something with the leek, but leeks can collect a lot of dirt. So, you know, I started off with this giant piece of leek, and I cut off most of the green, and that left me with, you know, this big piece of leek. I cut the other end off, and I cut it in half, and there were lots and lots of pieces of dirt inside. So then what you do is you just kind of run it under water, and it just kind of removes the dirt. There's lots of layers. You can also just set it in like a deep bowl or glass of water, and some of the dirt will come down, so you can do that too. And then I'm just going to slice the leek into, oh, they're like 1/4 inch pieces, not really big, but not too thin. And if you have a tough outer layer, like, you know, there's a couple of layers here that seem to be pretty tough, I'm just going to discard them, because if they're tough when I'm trying to cut them, they're probably going to be tough when we're eating them. So we don't want that. We want them to be, you know, pretty tender. We're going to cook them, but, you know, we just get rid of them if they're not good. So here's my leek. I'm just cutting it into the strips. And then I'm just going to put those in my hot pan. You'll hear the pan sizzle. I'm going to turn back to the pan. So I've got the leeks in here. And we're going to cook the leeks for a brief period of time. And then we're going to add the cabbage. So this is all going to cook down, and it's also going to cook in the oven. So we don't really care if, you know, this is totally cooked, because it's going to cook in the oven for 30 minutes. So it doesn't have to be completely cooked when we're messing with it now. We can just kind of make it al dente, I guess, if you want to use that term. So we have our cabbage and our leeks, and we'll let that cook for a minute. And I'm going to be adding some other ingredients. I'm going to be adding some flavorings so that this has some taste. And so what flavorings would I add to this? Well, one thing is vegetable broth. So I use the Central Market vegetable broth. It tastes pretty good. It's easy to get. You can make your own. Just keep your vegetable scraps, bring them to a boil, simmer them for 30 minutes, and you can have vegetable broth. The Forks Over Knives has a really good recipe for vegetable stock, and they put a cup of green lentils and some other aromatics in their vegetable stock, and that just gives it a really good depth of flavor. So I kind of like their recipe. You can Google Forks Over Knives vegetable broth and find it. So I'm going to put a couple of tablespoons of that in here. You can hear the pan's pretty hot. Then it has some kind of Asian flavors too. One thing is it has mirin, which mirin is listed as like a alcohol rice. It's really like a rice wine. It has a really nice flavor. It's kind of sweet, but we use it a lot in Asian food. My mother used it a lot. I think a lot of you know that my mother is Japanese, and we always had mirin in our cabinet. She used it to make teriyaki sauce, so it's an ingredient I'm familiar with. Then one of the other ingredients is tamari, which is, this is a gluten-free, sort of a richer version of soy sauce. So it's got a really good flavor. So we're going to use a couple of tablespoons of that. Now, if you don't like this much, my beans are about to boil over. You see, they're coming to a boil now. So I'm going to start timing them so I'll know when to stop. So if you don't want to use this much tamari, feel free to cut that down or cut it out. It's not necessary to make the dish good. I like the flavor of it. So we've got the cabbage cooking down. I'm going to turn the heat up a little bit to get it cooking. And we've got the leeks in here. And we've got our tamari, vegetable stock, and mirin. Those were our flavorings. And if the cabbage is starting to cook down, it was half of a head of green cabbage. And I told you later on that we'll talk about alternative fillings. And then I'm going to add my kale. And this is the lacinato or dinosaur kale. This kale, to me, it tastes really good. It's different from the usual kale that I used to always buy, is the kind of the curly leaf kale, which also tastes good. So, you know, you might give this one a try and see if you like it. Kale is easy to find. For some reason, the store shelves haven't been completely cleaned out of things like kale and cabbage. Well, I guess cabbage was in shortage yesterday because of St. Patrick's Day, but usually you can find, you know, vegetables easily. I had no trouble. Anytime I've been to the store, the vegetable aisle is always, you know, full. In fact, I have the advantage of being 65, that I'm in that group of at-risk elderly people that now I can go to the grocery store the first hour of the day before it's open to the regular public. So, you know, I am in that age group, so I'll probably take advantage of it, even though I believe that eating a whole food plant-based diet, tons of anti-immune kind of ingredients immune boosting ingredients and antioxidants has been favorable to my aging process. I'm still in that group, so I'll probably go early. And then the last thing I'm going to add is this arrowroot. It's not coming out very well. It's some arrowroot starch that's been mixed with water. And what that does is that allows the cabbage and the liquid and everything to thicken up a little bit, so you don't have your filling is not going to be runny and watery when you cut into your shepherd's pie. You kind of want it to hold together well. And then some other ingredients, we could put some salt in here. We could put a pinch of sea salt. So I'll do that. Now I'm going to post the recipe for this shepherd's pie on my Facebook page after the demonstration is over. I did that yesterday, so I promise I'll do that. I'm just putting a little sea salt in there so that you'll have the recipe for this. And in my recipe, it will say after you added all of this stuff, just cook it for a couple minutes, because like I said, we're going to be cooking it more. And to me, it's cooked enough. You can still see the vegetables are vibrant. They still have some color. They have texture. I'm not in the school of people that likes to cook their vegetables to death. You know, that was kind of my grandmother from North Carolina. She cooked vegetables until they disintegrated, which upset my Japanese mother to no end. She told me one time, she said, oh, she cooked those green beans for hours. In Japan, we cooked green beans for 2 minutes. So she could never get over that. So, but I don't like the overcooked vegetables, so I'm going to keep them kind of crispy. Now I have just a pie pan, so it's just one I happen to have. You could use a casserole dish. I just thought it looked cool in this pie plate. So I'm going to put all my vegetables in there. Now get this out of the way. So I've got the vegetables in the bottom of the pie plate, and then we're going to make the topping. So to make the topping, it's very simple. Got to get my food processor up here. Have it ready. All right, now the topping is made of cauliflower. If for some reason you don't love the taste of cauliflower and you want to use potatoes, feel free. You can use potatoes. You can steam the potatoes just like we steam the cauliflower. Steamed potatoes have a better taste than boiled potatoes, believe it or not. If you did a taste test and tested steamed potatoes against boiled potatoes for potato flavor, you would really like the steamed potatoes. So we're going to put our cauliflower, all our steamed cauliflower, in the food processor. Now I'm using the food processor. You can use a high-speed blender. I've done it both ways. Now I prefer the cauliflower to be a little bit on the done side, or not done side, to have some body to it, to not be too much of a smooth topping. And I noticed that when I made it in the Vitamix blender, the cauliflower topping had this really soft texture to it. So when I made it in the food processor, it seemed to have a better body to it. So I'm going to add my cashew cream. So I made this ahead. This is some cashews that have been soaked, raw cashews. You buy them unsalted, unroasted. I'm going to add half a cup. If you take half a cup of cashews with half a cup of water, then you get your cashew cream. Cashew cream is what gives it a really good flavor, so I would not leave that out. However, if you don't want to use cashews, you could use pine nuts or macadamia nuts, or probably almonds or sunflower seeds, or any kind of nuts that you prefer. So we are using the pine nuts or the cashews this time. And then it calls for a half cup of water. I don't have my water handy. So I'll just get this water. I usually would use filtered water, but this is all we have right now. And then 2 tablespoons of nutritional yeast. Now, the nutritional yeast that I like is this Sorry brand. I get it from Amazon. I don't like to get all of my ingredients from Amazon, but I haven't been able to find this particular brand anywhere, and it's unfortified. So it just has a really good taste. It doesn't have, there's kind of an aftertaste sometimes in nutritional yeast that I don't care for. Some people seem to like it, but it's just not a taste that I love. So I prefer to use this unfortified one. Now it also calls for a pinch of salt. And I see a bunch of people are watching, and I hope if you've made a comment, I probably missed it because I can't multitask in too many different ways. I guess, you know, I'm not a millennial, so I can't do 10 things at once, but if you made a comment, please, once this is recorded and put on Facebook, ask me your question again. I'll be happy to answer it. So I've got everything in the food processor, and I'm going to turn it on. Sorry about the noise. I'm going to let it go until it's smooth. I can kind of see. Sorry. There's no way to speed this up. It's okay. Let me make sure I have all the ingredients in it. Yep. All right, I think it's ready. And you'll see when you look at my topping that it has a little texture to it. It's not completely smooth, and I really like it that way. Move this out of my way. All right, so now all I'm going to do is put the cauliflower topping on top of my vegetables. And you'll see it's pretty thick. And when I cook it, I'm going to cook it at 375 in my convection setting. Now my oven has a convection setting as well as a regular bake setting, and I think the convection setting makes it nicer because what will happen is it will brown around the edges. I think you've seen the picture that I posted of the recipe, and it's kind of brown and bubbly. Well, that's because I made it on the convection setting. So if you can do that, try it. I think you'll really appreciate the color. And now if you make this and it doesn't have a nice kind of golden brown crust on it, what I would advise you to do is put it under the broiler, and then it will. Now, so if you look at it, see, it's this beautiful thing. It's full of fresh green vegetables. It has this creamy, delicious cauliflower topping, and I'm going to put it in the oven. Cook it for about 30 minutes, and it'll be great. Now, my beans are coming along quite nicely. They boiled for the 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do now, and you can just see, you know, they just look like nothing. They haven't cooked long enough for anything to happen. I have a lid for my pot. I'm going to put the lid on, and my lid for this pot has a little bit of a vent. So I'm going to kind of caulk it on there so it will vent, because I just don't want to cover it completely. The recommendation from the Rancho Gordo people was to put the lid on kind of in an angle so some steam could escape, and I found that works really well. Okay, so those are our 2 recipes for today. Oh, that still took way too long, so I'm sorry. I don't want to keep you on these videos this long, so I'll work on making them faster. I did want to say that if you don't like those fillings for the cauliflower shepherd's pie, that there's plenty other things you can put in there. You could use cooked beans or lentils. We could take the beans we made here, and we could mix some beans with garlic cloves, leeks, or onions. We could put some canned tomato. We could put spinach, kale, Swiss chard, a little balsamic vinegar. That's one version. So think about a version of beans and greens. Any greens, spinach is fine. And then another version, you could use any kind of mushrooms. So let's say you had shiitake mushrooms, onions, thyme, Swiss chard, a cup of chickpeas, some tamari, the same kind of seasonings as this recipe, black pepper. So those are 2 variations besides the one I showed you with the cauliflower topping. And again, if you don't like cauliflower, substitute potatoes, or use half and half. I've tried that and it was really good. Half cauliflower, half potatoes. I know some of us are stuck at home. We might just be using things we have in the pantry, canned beans, leftover vegetables, frozen vegetables. Yeah, this would be great with any of that. You could probably even get away with using some frozen cauliflower. I think you can get frozen riced cauliflower. Maybe you have a big bag of it that you bought at Costco on sale a long time ago. Try that. It probably would work. But if not, cauliflower is inexpensive and readily available. So let's see, are there any questions here? Some people thanking me. They're excited. Somebody put an angry emoji up there, so I hope I haven't upset you, but my plan is to do a daily cooking demo of what I'm cooking for my dinner. So there's nothing prepared ahead, there's nothing that I'm trying to show off. I'm just cooking things that I'm cooking every day, just for fun, just to connect with you all out there and to let you know that I'm still doing what I do. My classes have been canceled for a while, but I'm still cooking, and I'm going to post a list of recipes that I'm making for the next few days and give you a shopping list. So if you wanted to cook with me, you could do that. That was my daughter Helen's suggestion. She loves to cook too. So I'll do that. I hope you like that. And if you have a request of something you would like to see me make, just put it in the comments after this has been posted to my Facebook page, and I will try to make that. I had someone yesterday send me a message that they wanted to make popcorn tofu, and I found a recipe for air fried tofu, and she said that would be good. So she requested it and I'll make it. And then another thing I'm going to do for you is, as soon as I get my garden planted, we'll do a session where we visit the garden and see what's growing. I have a friend that was watching earlier, if she's still there, Lisa Wright, who lives in Granbury. She's a chef friend, and she has an amazing garden and chickens, and maybe she'll do this too, because I would love to see what's growing in her garden. So thank you, everybody. I really, really appreciate you watching, and I'll see you again tomorrow, and I'll be posting more of these videos. Thank you very much. I hope you're all doing well. I miss my classes and miss seeing all of you. Thank you. Bye-bye.